There are two meaning to sankhara, both in the active and the passive, sense, So when you actually say sankhara in the passive sense, it means actually anything, that's actually conditioned, or anything that's actually constructed by causes and conditions. So anything, as long as is constructed or fabricated by causes and conditions, so you actually call it a sankhara. Like for example, my PC here is a sankhara. The mic here is a sankhara. The book you look at is a sankhara. Any human beings also is a sankhara. So anything, as long as it's actually being constructed by causes and conditions, we call it sankhara. But in the active sense, sankhara actually means, volitional formations. It means, it is actually something that's actually, that is actually being willed, something that you actually form, a volition, something that you have an intention, something that you actually, have an active decision, to do something. So sankhara, volitional formations. And of course, sankhara, it is a broader term compared to cetana. Cetana is just, it means, volition, intention, but sankhara is actually more than that. Cetana is just a part of sankhara, but sankhara itself, it actually comprises cetana, which is our formation, our basically our intention, our volition, and also other mental qualities or other mental factors, So that's why with this cetana and other mental qualities, then you have this sankhara. That's why in this paticca samuppada, we actually have this, there's this conditionality, right? Ignorance actually, is a condition for sankhara, because of ignorance. And then sankhara itself is conditioned for consciousness, and then consciousness is a condition for nama-rupa, and then to this, to the six sense bases and so forth. You have the contact, the feelings, and the craving and the clinging, and the being, becoming, and the birth. So this sankhara itself, is something that is something that is volition, by intention. So that's why this sutta itself, right, is called Sankhara-rupapati Sutta. Means, you actually make the aspiration, for you to reappear or to be reborn, in certain, realms of existence that you desire, So you actually make that conscious aspiration, or that sort of you make that wish or the aspiration in your mind, that I wish to be reborn, in a certain particular realms of existence. So that's why this sutta, is very interesting. The Buddha, gave this discourse, to the bhikkhus, as to how, one can actually make that aspiration, whenever, someone has actually done perhaps a wholesome deed, to make the aspiration to be reborn or to reappear in a certain realm of existence. So actually when you read this title, right, that you actually make that aspiration or the kind of a wish, or to make that aspiration or determination in your mind, that, by the power of this merit that I've done, may I, actually reappear in a certain realm of existence, right? Of course, many people have different aspirations as far as rebirth, especially for us, where we haven't quite come to the stage, where we actually make the aspiration to attain Nibbana in this very life itself, But of course, the practice of a Dhamma is something that's very gradual. We don't expect anyone, to everybody to have the same aptitude or the ability, to be able to strive to attain Nibbana in this very lifetime. But at least, while we are still in this samsara, that we are still very much enchained to. In the meantime, this sutta itself serves as a very good guide for us, to actually understand how, we can actually make aspiration to be reborn, in certain realm of existence. And of course, different people have different aspirations. Some wish to be reborn, say, in the Tava Timsa heaven. Some perhaps, they make the aspiration, I want to be reborn in Tusita heaven, where, the next upcoming Buddha, the Metteyya Bodhisattva, is there. I want to make the aspiration to be reborn in Tusita heaven so that I can create the karmic affiliations or the karmic connections, with the future Buddha, the Bodhisattva who is now residing in Tusita heaven. Many people actually make the aspiration, I want to be reborn in Tusita. And even if you look at certain commentaries in the suttas, right, where they actually provided some very interesting accounts of, like those very well practiced lay people like Chitta, at his deathbed, he actually, made the aspiration that, I want to be reborn in Tusita heaven, But of course, we wouldn't know what the motivation behind it was, but he made that aspiration, to be reborn in Tusita heaven. And more often than not, even like, for example, Anatta Pindika, he was also reborn in Tusita heaven. So you find a lot of this well-practiced, lay Buddhists who had the chance, to listen to the Buddha's discourse and practice dana, sila, bhavana to a very good extent. Most of them, they're actually reborn in Tusita heaven. So, and of course, some well-practiced ones, they may want to make the aspiration to be reborn in perhaps, like, for example, the Brahma realm, because, they have been able to practice up to a stage where they're able to maintain, the jhana attainments, at a very high level, and because of this, they're able to be reborn in the form world, and some even in the formless worlds, right? Any of the 16 form Brahma worlds or the 4 Arupa realms, where it is formless. So we all have our different different abilities and different stages of practice and spiritual practice, as far as the Dhamma is concerned. That's why we all have different aspirations. But if you actually look at this sutta, right, 120, in terms of, seeking rebirth by aspiration, most of you, or perhaps maybe some of you, will find it a bit odd, right, because if you read the suttas, the Buddha in many suttas, right, did actually speak about, the uncertainty of rebirth, right? If you actually read some of the suttas, right, the Buddha actually spoke about the danger and the wretchedness of samsara, Remember, like, if you are not a stream enterer yet and you haven't attained Sotapatti, the Buddha says, that the process of rebirth is just like throwing a stick up into the air, and where a being, might land in any of the 31 realms of existence, it's something that's actually quite unpredictable, and it's something that no one can say for sure, So whether the stick actually lands on the front end or the back end, or whichever way the stick lies, it can be top, it can be bottom, it can be anywhere, right? So the Buddha gave this very good description, as to how rebirth actually happens to the Puthujjanas, I would say, because unless you have actually attained Sotapatti, then remember the Buddha says that the woeful plains, basically they are off limits to the Sotapana, the Sotapan, the woeful plains, like, for example, the hell, the Peta world, the animal realms, these 3 Apaya realms, right, the woeful plains are off limits, the Sotapan, will not be reborn in any of these Apaya realms. But if you are not a Sotapan yet, and you are still a Puthujjana, then, there's actually no guarantee as to where you'll be reborn, So, actually, I just want to show you some of the suttas here, okay? Like, for example, as I mentioned before, in this Samyutta Nikaya 15.9, the Danda Sutta. Danda is a stick, right? Danda Sutta, right? So, if you can see from here, the Buddha actually says about samsara, inconsiderable beginning comes, transmigration, So the Buddha actually talks about how wretched, and how dangerous, samsara can be, And yeah, if you look at it, samsara is indeed something that's really really, of much suffering since time in beginning, In fact, if you look at our Malay word, samsara actually is somehow, it actually mirrors the word samsara, right? So you can see the Malay word actually, is in a way, it has its root in the word samsara. Samsara and samsara, they're actually quite similar. So if that's why in the Malay word samsara means suffering, So that's why in Pali, samsara also, is something that, it continues to flow, without any cessation, it goes on forever and ever. So that's why the Buddha says, in this, it says, just as a stick thrown up in the air, sometimes land on the base, sometimes on the side, sometimes its tip, In the same way, if you can read here, beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, transmigrating and wandering on, sometimes go on from this world to another, sometimes, from this world to this. So which means what the Buddha is saying, that it's just like a stick throwing up at random, And if you also see this, another sutta, I want to just share with you this sutta as well, on Majjhima Nikaya 136, on the Maha Karma Vibhanga Sutta, the great exposition of karma. It's also a very interesting sutta, because a lot of times, we say, wow, if this person is well practiced, he's been doing dana, sila, bhavana, right, all his or her life, so surely such a well practiced and virtuous person, right, will definitely go to the Sugati Bhumi, right? You will say, right, that definitely this person, he's so well practiced, which every day, or whenever, he has the chance, he will come and offer dana to the monks, he provide all the requisites, and also he practice, he actually practice, and safeguarded, his sila very well, assiduously. He doesn't, break his precepts. And, on the Sabbath day, on the Uposatha days, he practiced the 8 precepts, and he meditates, he has very high levels of meditative, experience, So surely such a person, will actually be reborn in the Sugati Bhumi, in the happy realms, and somebody who actually does not keep his precepts well, and breaks the 10 ducharitas, the 10 unwholesome actions, like I mentioned about the 3, 4, 3, right? 3 by body, 4 by speech, and 3 by mind, and it's surely such a person who does not keep his sila well, definitely, will actually go to the woeful plains. But bear in mind, that's not the case, based on this sutta from Majjhima Nikaya. The Buddha says, if you look at this stanza number 6, the Buddha says, Ananda, there are 4 kinds of persons exist in this world. What 4? Here, some person kills living beings, takes what's not given, like I mentioned, the 10 unwholesome actions, right? The 10 ducharita. And on the dissolution of the body after death, he appears in the upper realms, in unhappy destination in hell. Okay, that we understand. Okay, but the Buddha says, here, some living beings, some persons kill living beings, and does all the 10 ducharitas, but on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in the happy destination in the heavenly world, So it's kind of a contradiction, right? The Buddha says, and here, and the third one is, here some person abstains from the ducharitas, okay, and the dissolution of the body, he appears in the happy destination in the heavenly world. Okay, so that also is fine. And the last one, and the Buddha says, but here some person abstains from these 10 ducharitas, these 10 unwholesome actions, yet on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a state of deprivation, in the woeful plains, even in hell. So there is no guarantee, that is in effect what the Buddha is saying, because you may have actually done a lot of good deeds, but these good deeds have not ripened, and perhaps to ripen in future, lifetimes. But at the point, of the point, just at the deathbed, just at the very last, that point of consciousness, somehow certain conditions appear, certain sankharas appear that actually propel the consciousness to seek rebirth in realms, that is actually quite different, from how he has been behaving, So maybe the good deeds that he has done or the good karma he has done may not have ripened, but they'll ripen in the future. But the next destination itself, is something that may actually be not quite aligned, with how he has actually behaved or practiced in the current lifetime. So that's why this also is very much consistent with the earlier sutta where the Buddha says, it's like as long as you are putujana, it can be any direction, like a stick being thrown up. So that is the danger of samsara, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have done a lot of good deeds, means you're necessarily reborn in the Tavatimsa heaven, or even, in Tusita heaven, where you get to, enjoy the exquisite enjoyment of the 5 courts of sensual pleasure, like with the devas, And it does not necessarily mean that all the devas there in the previous life also, were well practiced, Perhaps they had done all this, but somehow, they managed to be reborn there because of the last thought or the last consciousness, that at the time perhaps then the sankhara that drove this, caused this rebirth is something, something wholesome. That's why even this unvirtuous person, is somehow he's able to be reborn in the good realms of existence. So that's the danger of samsara. There's no guarantee. That's what the Buddha says. And again, in AN 4.77, right, the Buddha also mentioned about the 4 unconjecturables. Means something that 4 things that you cannot fully fathom or understand. Okay, and there are these 4 things that the Buddha says that they are not to be conjectured or fathomed, otherwise it will lead to madness and vexation to anyone who try to even understand. For example, the Buddha range of the Buddhas means how the range of the power that the Buddhas will have is something that we cannot fully understand, in terms of his sabanyuta jnana, how he's able to all the psychic powers that he has, And if you look at, for example, in DN24, the Buddha was actually able to recollect, past lives of the Buddhas, right from like Vipassi, from, Vesabu Buddha, the Sikhi Buddha, and all the way to Kakusanda, Kodangamana, to Kassapa, all these, Buddhas, 5 Buddhas in the past, the Buddha was actually able to recollect their lives up to the minutest detail, and the Buddha was able to also have the power of, delivering the Dhamma, based on the temperaments, of the audience, and he was able to know who on that day was able to attain, for example, Sotapatti, or able to attain the different stages of enlightenment. The Buddha was able to have that power to know, and he would travel sometimes long distances just to meet those people, to give the Dhamma discourse. Like for example, Pukusati and all this, the Buddha was able to know, when the person was able to attain. So that's the power of the Buddha. And the jhana range of a person in jhana, we are not able to understand. A person in jhana, will have the power, to actually, for example, dive into the ground, solid ground, like as though it's water, or he's able to walk on water, like for example, walking on a lake, like as though it's on solid, and he's able to actually go through mountains, like as though it's actually air. He's able to fly, to the moon, to even up to, long distances without, fly in the air without taking a plane, and able to hold the moon in his hand. That sort of jhanic power, nobody can understand, it's actually quite something that's actually quite mind-blowing sometimes, but, it does happen, and of course, you have and the Buddha says the precise working of the results of karma, the vipaka, you see. So that's why, the Buddha says that this karma is something that's so intricate and so complex that nobody knows exactly how it works, And of course, the Buddha talks about origin of the world. It's also something that cannot be conjectured, But of course, in Digha Nikaya 27, the Buddha actually did speak about how, we humans actually first appear in the world. and it's actually very interesting. Not the beginning of the world, but how human beings, actually came to this world in DN 27, which is the Aganya Sutta. I mean, in the future, maybe I can also speak on this as well. But it's something that's very interesting. But if you look at it, these are the the unconjecturable. The Buddha says that you cannot actually fathom. And one of these is actually how the karma actually works. So you see this karma, but this karma itself is something that's very important, because you see in the Paticca Samuppada, avijja paccaya sankhara, avijja is the ignorance. Ignorance, because we still have ignorance, that's why the cetana we have, the volition that we have, it actually produces the karma, because we still have ignorance. So that's why, but for the arahants, because they already, the ignorance has been totally uprooted. So the cetana they still have cetana, but the cetana is not karmic producing. Not like us, we still have ignorance, so even up to the anagamis, they still have ignorance. So whatever cetana they have, it actually produces the karmic energy, which will bring the resultant vipaka, So that's why you see avijja paccaya sankhara. So the sankhara itself is actually karma, So this karma, is the one that will actually also propel the consciousness to seek rebirth, in the, consciousness into nama rupa, and then also then becomes a sixth sense basis. Then sixth sense basis then becomes contact. So you see, this karma is something that's actually very critical, right? And this karma itself that will determine the rebirth itself, And so that's why we need to actually understand. And karma is something that we cannot actually fully understand, But that is the link that will actually, that will actually then result in the perpetuation or continuation of these 12 links that result in all this whole mess of suffering we have, pain, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, that we have because of birth. But this karma, as long as it's there, is continuous. It's just like, as long as you turn on the power, as long as electricity is there, right? I mean, the radio will continue to play, and everything, the light will continue to also be, there will also continue to be light because of electricity. So this karma is the one. And we need to then also be aware of this, That's why the Buddha says this, we cannot understand karma, and also, and this karma is the one that causes us to reappear and to be reborn in the various realms of existence, So, and it's uncertain how it will actually pan out, or how it will actually happen, right? Unless, you're a sotapan, then you can say for sure, I will definitely be reborn as a human, or in the Sugati Bhumi, either as a Deva or Brahma, But as long as you're not a sotapan, nobody can be sure. I also cannot tell you, if a person is well practiced, definitely he's going to go to Sugati Bhumi. Or if somebody is actually been behaving like a rogue, and has been breaking all his precepts, definitely he'll go to hell. I cannot say that for sure. Based on this Majjhima Nikaya, Buddha says the 4 types of person, nobody can be sure. And of course, if you look at AN 6.7, the Buddha says there are these 6 qualities a person is incapable of understanding the Dhamma. So it's like there are these 4 weighty these weighty karmas, that you must not commit. Otherwise, no matter what it is, you are not able to actually even understand the Dhamma and achieve the breakthrough to the Dhamma. And you're not able to even attain, become a sotapan. Even though the Buddha, you happen to see a Buddha, for example, the Buddha says, the 6 qualities here, okay? So which means there are these 5 weighty karma that you should not commit. For example, the Buddha says he has killed his mother, he has killed his father, he has killed an arahant. He has, with malicious intent, caused the blood of a Tathagata to flow, and he has caused a split in the Sangha, or he is a person, of Tao discernment, slow and Tao-witted. So if any of this, you have done any of these 5 weighty karma, and if you're actually of a Tao intelligence, you're not able to understand about what the Buddha has taught, or the Dhamma, then the Buddha says with these 6 conditions, this person is unable to even understand, and achieve the breakthrough to the Dhamma, and even though he listens to the true Dhamma, he's actually not able to to attain this, the Dhamma eye, for example, remember the Ajata Satu, he killed his father, right? Because he wanted to be the king, So there was one day he actually went to see the Buddha because, he actually was, he felt very uneasy one night, because he thought about the fact that he killed his father, right? And, he felt very, he kind of like, felt very uneasy and uncomfortable, and, his mind was a bit confused. So he wanted to see the Buddha. And when the Buddha saw him and he actually listened to the Dhamma discourse, and then, and after that he left. Then the Buddha actually told the monks that this Ajata Satu, is such a foolish person, right? If he had not killed his father, the king Bimbisara, he would actually be on that day itself become a Sotapan, But because he has killed his father, the Buddha says he was not able to attain the Sotapan, even become a Sotapan, even though he was actually meeting the Buddha face to face, and the Buddha gave him a discourse, and he was not able to achieve that Dhamma eye, So he actually missed that very valuable opportunity, to actually attain, this fruition, a Sotapatti fruition, So you can see, as though we know that this karma, is something that's actually very complex, but make sure, we don't commit any of this 5 weighty karma, and and hopefully we are not born, with down intelligence, with these 6 conditions, that at least we still have a chance, to be reborn, in a good realm of existence, So be careful, Arahant, we don't know. Sometimes it may appear like a swami, but in any like in India or what, and if this swami is so haggard and shabbily dressed and what, and then you look down on the Arahant and you do anything, that's where the danger is, that the karma can be quite weighty, just like this super Buddha, right? He was a leper, So the reason why he was there, because he actually spitted, on a swami, and that swami was actually a Pachika Buddha, So be very careful, of this karma, So always treat each other with respect, Don't underestimate anyone, okay? So that's karma, and of course, like I said, this samsara itself, is so wretched, and so dreadful and dangerous. The reason why is because the reason why it's actually wretched and dreadful is because of what we have: the woeful plains, right? We have the animal realms, we have the Peta realms, and we actually have the hell realms. If samsara just comprises if samsara itself just consists of Sugati Bhumi, like human and the Deva realms, actually, most of us would not mind samsara, right? I mean, can you imagine, I can just either be reborn as a human, or other than that, if I do good deeds, I'm reborn in the Deva realms, every day, I go, I enjoy and be merry with all the female devas in the Nandana garden, and I listen to the Gandhabas playing, the flute, in all the exquisite music, I eat all the nice food, no emails, no deadlines, no boss to report to, and every day it's like having a perpetual block leaf, right? Isn't that nice? Like block leaf, you only have 1 week, right? But this one is like millions of years, you don't have to do anything, just nothing to don't have to work, don't have to worry about your job, no emails to write, to reply to, so nice, right? It's like a perpetual block leaf, who wouldn't want that, So can you imagine, but samsara is not just about the yang, there's also the yin, right? There's also the apaya realms waiting for us there, So if you're not careful, you might just sidestep, and then, you might just fall into the upper realms, That's why even the Deva realms, they're also not, in a way, totally, they are also not free of this danger, So if you look at this sutta itself, right, you see, the Buddha says, when a Deva is due to pass away from the Buddhas, there'll be 5 signs that appear. His flower garlands wither, his clothes become soiled, and then he will start to have sweat, from his armpits, and his radiance fades, and the Deva takes no delight, in his heavenly throne, because Devas, they are happy whenever they sit in their throne, but if this Devas are about to pass away, then, they know that it's time to go. So the Devas observing this sign, observing that these 5 signs have appeared, in their fellow Deva, right? And then they will encourage him, go from here, friend, to a good destination, having gone to a good destination, gain what is good to gain, having gained what is good to gain, become firmly established in it. So actually the Devas are actually encouraging this Deva to actually go to a good destination, and of course the Buddha here says, the Devas actually say, the good destination actually means to be reborn at least, to the human realm, and when you become a human, the Devas actually advise their friend to make sure that you establish your faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, firmly rooted, established, unwavering. Means that whenever if you are reborn, if you actually leave our Deva realm, and if you actually happen to be in a human realm, at least you must make sure that you practice such that your faith becomes firm, in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and of course this means, by attaining Sotapatti, you become a Sotapan, So you can see here, so as you can see here, the rebirth itself is something that's actually very uncertain. It's very unpredictable. Nobody knows, what will happen, right? Like I mentioned just now, the Buddha talks about, the karma and how it works, and nobody can be sure, so in order for us to be really, really sure, and to have a guarantee, that we will actually be able to seek rebirth in a good destination. The Buddha says, it is only, when you are able to end the 3 lower fetters, like what the Buddha says here, the 3 lower fetters, Sakaya Ditti, the doubt, and the Silabhata Paramasa, then when you become a Sotapan, then you are not liable to be reborn in the underworld, means you're not reborn in the upper realm and bound for awakening, which means this is the only guarantee, if you are able to become a Sotapan, that you will not be reborn in the upper realms, So, that is what the Buddha have actually given us in terms of this process of rebirth and how it's connected to karma. So back to our sutta, like I mentioned to you just now. See here, this MN120. So knowing that this process of rebirth itself is actually something that is very uncertain, right? And we have actually no certainty. That's why. Like from all the previous suttas that I actually highlighted to you, right? It's very clear that this there is no certainty, where one might be reborn. So in the interim, before any one of us, is able to attain to become a Sotapan, that's why the Buddha actually advised us, in this MN120, to make that aspiration, in the meantime, before we can get the guarantee, right? And of course, even though the process of rebirth may be uncertain, because depending on the complexity of karma, the Buddha in this MN120 actually then highlights that there is still a chance, or likelihood that you can, seek rebirth in the Sugati Bhubi by making the aspiration, and to make that determination, to make that wish, whenever you have actually done any good deeds, So that is something that we should keep in mind. which is what the Buddha mentions here, that we can actually try to make the aspiration to to reappear and to be reborn, in a good destination or in a happy destination, even though rebirth itself may be something uncertain. So in this sutta itself, right, this MN120, it started off by the Buddha actually, giving this course to the monks in Savatthi, in Jeta's Grove, in Anathapindika's Park, right? And, the Buddha actually tells, the bhikkhus, I shall teach you the reappearance in accordance with one's aspiration. Means you make that wish, to be reborn, in a certain destination, in a certain realm of existence of your wish or your desire, and here, the Buddha says, a bhikkhu possesses faith, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom, So actually, there's a caveat here, It does not mean that anyone, can will just make that wish, and necessarily, you create that strong likelihood, to be reborn in a good destination. The Buddha actually gave the caveat that this person must have saddha, sila, okay, and then he must have actually learning, which is the bahu sacha, and then the generosity, the chaga, and the wisdom, the panya. So essentially, it covers, these five main things, saddha, sila, you must also have learning, and then chaga and panya. Okay, so the Buddha says that you must have these five things, Then only then, if you make that wish, that aspiration, then you have that, you create that strong energy, that strong livelihood that you can actually be reborn in a good destination. So if you possess these five qualities, and you actually make that aspiration, and the Buddha says that when you make that aspiration, you must fix your mind on it, and you must establish it, develop it, and you must make sure that it's well developed and cultivated, which means it's not just doing it on and off, but whenever you have performed a good deed or wholesome karma, like for example, keeping your precepts or even performing any say generosity, or offering dana, or when you actually share merits, or you meditate, or you actually watch your mind, and you have this open mindfulness, and you try to see non-self, all these are actually merits, And whenever you have done these merits, the Buddha says, first of all, you must have this saddha, sila, chaga, panya. That's the caveat. Four things you must have, and you must actually keep your mind, fixed on this, and you must establish it and develop it, which means you must do this consistently. Whenever you have done any good deed, you must always make that wish, may I be reborn, in the Tusita heaven, by the power or strength of this merit that I've created, may I actually be reborn in the Tusita heaven, or anywhere, that you want to position yourself to. Or you can also maybe want to be reborn Tabatimsa, maybe you want to meet Saka, Dewa, Raja, you can actually make that wish. Or you may say that, oh, may I be reborn, in the Khatiyas, or even, rich families, or may I be reborn in a royal family. Up to you, you can, the Buddha says, it's actually something that's based on your wish, and that's why the Buddha says here, you see, Again, the Buddha says a bhikkhu possesses saddha, sila, chaga, panya, and then on the dissolution of the body after death, may I be reborn in the company of well-to-do Brahmins. Means you want to be reborn in rich families, and also some they want to be reborn in the Chatumarajika Deva. You see, the Buddha says here the four great kings. The four great kings, in this para 6, the Buddha says you can also make the aspiration because, you hear that, the four great kings, the Chatumarajika Deva, they are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness, and there are also those, that actually, make the aspiration to be reborn in the heavens of the 33, which is the Tavatimsa heaven, and also the Buddha says the Yama gods, the gods, the Tusita heaven, the gods who delight in creating, the Nimana Rati Deva, There are gods in the sensual realms who like to create things, like they create a lot of this things for their enjoyment, they like to create, things for sensual pleasure, and the gods who wield power over others' creations, the Paranimita Vasavasti Deva, they are the ones who control over these gods, who actually create. So these are all the sense realm, sense spheres devas, they still have male and female, they enjoy each other, they enjoy the company, the male devas who seek the company of the female devas and vice versa. And so is the Buddha says, if you fix your mind to it, develop it and cultivate it, but you actually must have what? Sada, Sila, Jaga, Panya, and of course learning, learning the suttas, learning the teaching, then only then you have that base to make that aspiration. Otherwise, if you don't have a bit difficult, it doesn't, not that effective, you don't have that catalyst, for that to happen, so it's always caveated, it doesn't mean anybody just, can just make the wish and it happens. The Buddha caveats it, that you must have this Sada, Sila, Jaga, Panya, and also learning. So, and then of course, the Buddha said, you can also aspire to be reborn the Brahma of the 1,000, this of course is basically, is actually the Brahma's assembly, those who achieve first jhana, you actually have the Brahmas of 1,000, the Brahmas of 2,000, the Brahmas of 3,000, you see here, the Brahmas of 4,000 and the Brahmas of 5,000, and these Brahmas are powerful, they're able to pervade the world system, of 5,000 worlds, they have reappeared there, and then there's also the Brahma of 10,000, and the Brahma of, you see here, the 100,000, Brahma of 100,000. So all these are basically Brahmas, they were able to achieve the first jhana, so they are able to be reborn, in the Brahmas, ministers of Brahma, or the Brahma's assembly, which are, and also the Maha Brahma. These are basically like Baka Brahma. He was also in the Maha Brahma. So basically, they are under the first jhana, But if you attain, like for example, the second jhana, is even more fantastic, right? You actually be reborn in the gods of the radiance. You need the gods, the Brahmas here. They are actually of resplendent light. They have these gods of limited radiance, gods of immeasurable radiance, gods of streaming radiance. These are basically those who have actually attained second jhana. And you have attained the third jhana, you are able to be reborn in the gods of the glory, the gods of limited glory, gods of immeasurable glory, and the gods of refulgent glory. And if you attain the fourth jhana, then you actually go into this gods of great fruit. And if you are anagami, you will also be reborn, these four realms which are reserved for anagamis, which are pure abodes or the Sudavasa, which is the Aviha gods, the Atapa gods, the Sudasa gods, the Sudasi gods, and also Akanikta gods. So these Brahmas are basically anagamis, they are reserved for the anagamis, these pure abodes. So you can also make the aspiration, and of course, there are also those who actually make aspirations to be born in the formless world, the Buddha says, based on infinite space, based on infinite consciousness, gods of neither perception nor non-perception, So, sorry, I forgot. Also base of nothingness before that. Base of nothingness and base of perception and non-perception. So these four formless realms. So if you fix your mind on it and develop it, but provided you have Sada, Sila, Jaga, Panya, and learning, then the Buddha says, that you're capable, of being reborn there, And the last one, the Buddha says, if a person actually have got this Sada, Sila, Jaga, Panya, and learning, and he actually makes that wish, by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I might here and now enter upon abide in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom, which means both way delivered. They are taintless with the destruction of taints, and by realizing from himself with direct knowledge here and now, he enters and abides, on this deliverance by mind and wisdom. They are taintless with the destruction of taints, and this is where he attains Nibbana, right? And the Buddha says, bhikkhus, this bhikkhu does not appear anywhere at all because, he has actually attained the final liberation, he has actually seen, nibbana, he has attained nibbana. So in that sense, he can still make that resolution, but he doesn't appear anywhere at all, So this sutta is very interesting because it gives us at least that hope, that even though we are not sotapan, and we don't have that guarantee, right, to be reborn in Sukati Bhumi, at least, we can still have this way out, right? This way out for us to increase our chance of being reborn in Sukati Bhumi. There's still a way, It's not like totally hopeless, that, we still have a chance to, to make sure that, we develop ourselves to be reborn in Sukati Bhumi and not let ourselves fall into the Apaya realms. And that's where the Buddha says, Sada, Sila, Chaga, Panya, and learning are very, very important, And make sure you always develop it, and sustain it and cultivate it. Whenever any good deed that you've done, make sure you make that conscious aspiration, may this marrow of mine be reborn, in this Tusita heaven or whatever, If your wish is actually not to attain Nibbana so soon, maybe that's what you want to wish, but this is actually depending on each spiritual practice, and some, of course, may want to make that wish to be, to be attain nibbana as soon as possible, or even to become a sotapan in this lifetime, So it depends on how you want to make that wish, but the Buddha gives you that avenue, If you want to be reborn in the Sukati Bhumi, yes, you can, especially for us who are still tied to the 5 cords of sensual pleasure as householders. Not all of us want to attain nibbana, but the Buddha gives you an avenue, that you can actually practice, and that's where MN120 is actually very important. It's very interesting, and it's also very important for us. So actually, this Sada, Sila, Chaga, Panya, if you actually look at it, in other suttas, like for example, AN 4.61, you can refer to this. You see here, the Buddha says. The Buddha says there are these 4 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. The Buddha talks about, most people, we want wealth, right? And we want to be rich, we want to have fame, and then next, you wish you want to have long life, you want to have a long lifespan, right? And the Buddha says, most people also want to actually have a good rebirth, With the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world, This is the 4th thing, And Buddha says that these 4 things are what most people wish for, but they are not easily gained. So the Buddha says, in order for you to attain these 4 things, you must have practice these 4 things. What 4? Accomplishment in faith, in virtue, in generosity, and in wisdom. You see, the Buddha emphasizes over and over again, especially for householders, for lay people. That's why you see number 4, the Buddha says, most people actually want a good rebirth in a heavenly world. So if you want to have a good rebirth in a heavenly world, the Buddha says you must have this Sada, Sila, Chaga, Panya. It's very, very important. The Buddha emphasizes over and over again. And of course, the Buddha talks about what is faith, The accomplishment of faith must have, the faith in the Buddha, in the Tathagata, based on the qualities of the Buddha, like what we chant, the Itipiso, Bhagava, Arahan, Sammasambuddho, right? Vijacharana, Sampano. So all these, whenever you chant, you must always reflect on the qualities of the Buddha, and you must have strong faith in the Buddha. So if you have this faith, you are having that strong base to develop the Sada. Then Sila, of course, here the Buddha talks about the 5 precepts. The generosity means being open-handed, being generous, and not miserly, and in terms of wisdom, the Buddha talks about these are the 5 hindrances. In this sutta, Buddha talk about, the 5 hindrances in terms of greed, ill will, in terms of sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and also in terms of doubt. So Buddha talks about, this wisdom in able to be able to read your mind. Whenever these 5 hindrances appear, you must quickly dispel them, try to, remove them, So that is actually wisdom for lay people, But you must be able to read your mind and to watch your mind, whenever any of these things happen, you must quickly remove it. So that's accomplishment in wisdom. So that's why the Buddha says, you know, the Buddha mentioned all this. It's very consistent with the previous suttas, where, you know, where the Buddha in MN120, you know, that you must have this Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya in order for you to make the aspiration. So in this sutta also, the Buddha talks, if you want to actually be reborn in the in a good destination, in the Sugati Bhumi, you know, then you actually must practice this Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya. You see, the suttas, they're very consistent and very like beautifully interwoven. Just like the Buddha says, Dhamma is beautiful in the beginning, the end, the beginning, in the middle, and the end, because everything is so beautifully interwoven that you don't see anything inconsistent with what the Buddha has taught. You know. Everything is so consistent. You see here, even in these suttas, in AN 8.54 to this Diga Janu. This Diga Janu, of course, you know, is a lay person. You know, 5 causes of sensual pleasure. I'll just give you the gist of it, this suttas. You see, there is these 4 qualities that lead to a lay person's happiness, well-being in lives to come. You see, the Buddha says, in your future rebirth, you know. And what are these 4 qualities? Again, Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya. You see, and the same thing the Buddha talks about. Saddha, Sila, you know, being the 5 precepts, generosity. But in terms of the wisdom, in this sutta, the Buddha, instead of talking about the 5 hindrances, the Buddha actually talks about, this is the case where disciple, you know, is, you know, has wisdom, and he's able to actually discern the arising and passing away, noble, penetrating, leading to the right ending of stress. This is called consummate in discernment. Means you're able to see the non-self nature of all sankharas, you know. When you're able to see that everything is non-self, then you know that everything is actually that actually everything arises and ceases through causes and conditions, and there's actually no permanent unchanging self that because of this, everything is a constant state of flux and change, and therefore it is actually dukkha, is unsatisfactory, and also because of that it is impermanent, you know, and is actually anicca, you know. If you're able to see this condition arising and cessation, you know, which is the non-self, which what the Buddha says is meditation on emptiness, which is sunyata, means you don't see anything that's permanent, everything is empty of a self. Then the Buddha says that you are consummate in wisdom, you know. So the Buddha says tiger paw. Tiger paw is the name for this Diga Janula. That these are the 4 qualities that lead to a lay person's happiness and well-being in lives to come, you know. So again, you see this sutta is consistent with MN120, so that you must have this Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya, you know, before, you know, you can make that aspiration to be reborn in a good destination. You see how beautiful the Dhamma is. Everything is so beautiful. You know. Everything is actually well interwoven. And of course, in this sutta in AN 7.5, you know, the Buddha talks about the 7 kinds of wealth, you know. And of course, here the Buddha talks the wealth of faith, Saddha, Sila, you know, conscious and prudence, learning, generosity, and wisdom, you know. So you see this 7 wealth, all of these 7 wealth, this Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya, actually, you know, is actually, again, the Buddha labels them as wealth, you know. So these are the 7 kinds of wealth. So that's why, you know, you see this Saddha, Sila, Jagga, Panya, you know, is actually something that's actually very, very, you know, emphasized, you know, by the Buddha, especially for lay people. You know, you can actually look at this in 7.5, you know, which the Buddha calls them as, you know, wealth. You see, again, just to share with you this AN 8.36, the Buddha talks about, you know, this 3 bases of meritorious activity, you know, on this, where the Buddha talks about, you know, Dana, Sila, Bhavana, these 3 bases of meritorious activity. And the Buddha says if you practice just Dana and Sila, you know, to a very low level, limited extent, then you'll be reborn, you know, as human beings in unfavorable condition. But if you actually practice it, you know, to a middle level, you know, then you are reborn in a human beings in a favorable condition, but still in human beings, as human beings. But if you have actually done meritorious actions, you know, that, you know, which in Dana Sila Bhavan, only in Dana Sila you practice it to a superior level, but you don't actually practice meditation. And because of this, you're only capable of reborn, you know, in either the 4 great kings, you know, or the Tavatimsa or the Tusita heaven, and all the way to the Paranimitta Vasavati Deva, those who control what's created by others. So actually, the Buddha is actually highlighting here, that if you want to be reborn, just within the sense spheres, you need to actually practice. Make sure you practice dana, sila to a superior level, But if you don't meditate, the Buddha says, you will not be able to be reborn among the Brahmas, So the highest you can go is just Paranimitta Vasavati Deva, which is actually the sixth, the sense sphere of the Sugati Deva Bhumis, So something also for you to ponder about. So anyway, just to share with you another sutta of AN 8.35, the Buddha again also talks about this 8 kinds of rebirth, where you can actually make that aspiration. You see, this sutta also is very consistent with MN120. You see, the Buddha says that if you actually give dana to the monks, right, and if you set your mind to it and you fix your mind, on the wish that I want to be reborn, in the rich Khatiyas, the rich Brahmins, or the rich householders, then you can actually make that aspiration, and you create that strong energy for you to be reborn there, But the Buddha says here, the caveat, you look at it again, the last paragraph here, but that is for someone who is virtuous, I say, not for someone who is immoral, because the heart's wish of one who is virtuous succeeds because of this purity, So this is actually, something that the Buddha actually mentioned, that you must have this, sila as the basis. Even if you want to make that wish to be reborn in any realm of existence, you must have this sila, But in this sutta, the Buddha spoke about sila, but in MN120, of course, the Buddha talked about sada sila jaga panya, okay? And of course, the importance of sila, as I mentioned to you before, is also emphasized in AN 10.177 on Jalan Sunin Sutta, remember, on offerings to the dead, like what we do in Chengbeng, right? Actually, the Buddha says that that it is not un-Buddhistic to make offerings to the dead. The Buddha says actually, the Buddha says if you make offerings to the dead, there might be beings who are able to partake, especially if they are, if they are reborn as petas, they are able to actually partake of the food, You're not talking about marriage, we're talking about physical offering of food, that if you actually bring food to offer to the dead, the beings, other beings, like for example, if your past ancestors, or maybe your ancestors from previous uncountable lives, they happen to be around you, they actually are able to partake, they eat the food, but it's just that, maybe of their condition, they're not able to eat that much, but maybe they can just eat some essence of it, but they're still able to eat. So this Jalan Sunin said, we are from the Brahmin family, none of my ancestors will be born in petas. So the Buddha says, even if you are actually don't have anybody to partake of the food, the Buddha says that by you making an offering, there is still benefit, So if you actually do dana a lot, but the Buddha says if you don't practice, you don't observe your sila well, the Buddha says that you might just end up as a royal elephant or the royal horse, or maybe you become a pet dog or a pet cat, like having an enjoyable life, like a chihuahua, with a rich family, or maybe with Bill Gates' dog or what, I don't know, but definitely, because you do a lot of dana, but you don't observe sila, but you end up, in the animal realm, but having enjoyment, exquisite enjoyment, like the pet dogs and pet cats, but the two don't offset each other. They don't like offset. They not like you have like Milo and tea and you offset. No, but actually it doesn't. So each will produce its own result. So this AN 10.17 says you might want to look at it. So what we do in Chengbeng is not un-Buddhistic. In fact, it's actually encouraged by the Buddha. So we should bring food to offer to the dead. And of course, in SN 4.22.6 or so, the Buddha talks about these Brahmins of the Western land. Also highlights about the importance of sila. If you want to make the aspiration to be reborn, the Buddha talks about this. There is this penghulu, like a headman. He came to the Buddha, one day, and he said, the Brahmins of the Western land, whenever someone dies, they will actually bring the person on a stretcher, and then they will basically they will actually in a way they actually bring they actually like in a way make well wishes to this person. May you be reborn in the heavenly realms. May you be reborn in a good destination. So they believe by doing this ritual, the person will be reborn in the heaven. Just like a lot of times we have all these rites and rituals where we chant and hopefully the person will go to heaven. And this Penghulu said, Blessed One, since you are so powerful, right? You have all this psychic power. Surely you can lead someone who has died into the heaven, right? If I ask you to, can you sort of like make some chanting or rites and rituals so that whoever who is dead, like my close whoever's close family member is dead, you can also bring the person to the happy destination, Sugati Bhumi, right? Surely you're so powerful, you can, right? Like what not a lot of times that's how it's practiced, we get those chanting and rites and rituals, right? Then the Buddha actually told this Penghulu, he said ask you a question, what if a man actually commits all these breaks all these precepts, and then he said, what do you think, if anyone actually just makes a prayer for this person to be reborn in a good destination, do you think that will actually help this person or not? The Buddha says that just like a man were to throw a large rock into a deep lake of water, and a great crowd of people gathering and gather there will actually pray, and do a lot of these rites and rituals. Hey, may may you actually flow up to the surface of the lake, and you keep on praying and praying. Do you think the rock will actually rise to the lake or not? The Buddha, then this Penghulu said, of course not, because this rock is so heavy, of course it will come down. Then, similarly, what happens if the person who's very virtuous, and the person dies already, right? But you keep on cursing him, may you go down to hell, may you go down to hell. Then they asked the Penghulu, do you think the person will go to hell or not? Then the Penghulu said, probably not, Then the Buddha says, it's just like when you throw a jar of ghee or oil into a deep lake, right? And the jar breaks, and then the oil actually flows up to the surface of the lake. And if you actually do all this chanting and do a lot of all this praying and all this, do you think the ghee will actually sink to the bottom of the lake or not? Of course not, right? Because the ghee itself, it will float to the surface of the sea. No matter how you chant or how you do rituals or not, the ghee will not sink to the bottom of the lake, because it is simply less dense than water. You will actually rise up to the lake. So then this Penghulu said, oh yeah, then he said, oh, magnificent Lord, magnificent Bhante, wow, you have actually taught us a very good lesson in Dhamma, So that's right, this Buddha says this sila is very, very important, no matter even if you're well practiced and someone curses you, to be reborn, it will not matter, So that's where it's so important, for us, to practice, to make sure that we practice the way, And of course, I just also want to maybe, because of time issue, I just want to hold on, maybe highlight to you, that knowing that this intention is very important. What I want to basically highlight as a takeaway, this intention is something that's very important because this sankhara, as well, what we can see from this MN120, which is a Sankhara Rupa Pati Sutta, right? The intention itself is something that's very, very important because it is actually the cetana, the volition, and cetana, of course, is a subset of sankhara. So sankhara itself is karma producing, So whenever you have this karma, that will actually determine where you be reborn. But if you look at the paticca samuppada, right, what is the cause of sankhara? The cause of sankhara is ignorance, It's because we have not realized the Four Noble Truths about ignorance, about the true nature of all conditioned phenomena. That's why we are still shrouded in ignorance. That's why our duty right now is to contemplate, and understand the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth, where the Buddha talks about, the origin of suffering. It's about the truth about suffering. The truth about suffering. So if you actually don't understand about the truth of suffering, you do not understand about the non-self nature of all the conditioned phenomena, and because of this, you're not able to actually also understand the origin of suffering, but it's actually craving, because you treat everything like as though there's a self, and you do not understand the non-self, the emptiness of all conditioned phenomena, and because of that, you do not also understand, in terms of this origin of suffering, and you also not able to then, you're not able to eradicate this craving to actually realize the cessation of suffering, and because of that, the fourth this noble truth in terms of the way of the practice of suffering, also you don't practice it, and because of this you're not able to realize the Four Noble Truths. That's why this ignorance is still very much ingrained in us. So our duty now is to practice in terms of our our meditation. We need to be able to realize this condition arising and cessation of all conditioned phenomena. Like I always mention, the first most important thing is actually to watch your mind all the time, how it reacts, to the external sense objects, when they impinge on our sense base, how we react to it. We need to be able to also be aware, whether any loba, dosa, moha arise in it, and then from there we should be able to, in a way, make sure that we are able to restrain ourselves. Like what the Buddha spoke about, in the tortoise, the sutta on this Kuma Sutta, where you shouldn't actually react negatively and create karma, but we try to restrain. Just like what Ajahn Chah says, don't let the chicken out of the chicken coop, but make sure that you don't react, you restrain yourself by not looking at the details and features of the sense object, and restrain yourself by using, this samatha practice as well, samatha practice, and from there, then apply vipassana, by looking at the condition arising of how this loba, dosa, moha arise, through the method that Buddha explained in MN148, in 6 sets of 6, and also what Nandaka in this Venerable Nandaka also advises, in MN146, in terms of how you see the light as being conditioned, So if you're able to see this over and over again, and you're able to attain the breakthrough to the Dhamma with the arising of the Dhamma eye, then lo and behold, that you have attained Sutapati. That's where you can have the final, the assurance that you will not be reborn in the Apaya realms, and up to 7 lifetimes you'll be reborn only, in the human and also the Dewa realms. That's why the Buddha says for Sotapanna, the suffering is just like the sand in his fingernail compared to the earth, on the great earth. That's why the Buddha says our duty now is to make sure that at least if you are not able to get out of samsara in this lifetime, make sure that at least you attain and become a sotapan, and get out of and make sure that you don't actually fall into these upper realms for now. Then the Buddha says you can have up to 7 lifetimes, and you are bound for enlightenment. And niyato, you are able to. You are destined, bound for enlightenment. So then you can take the slow boat out of samsara. So the duty now for us is to make sure that we practice to be, make sure that at least we are not able to get out of samsara for now. At least try to make sure that we get ourselves out from the Apaya realms first, so that we become. That's our guarantee, Then from there, we can slowly get out of samsara. But in the meantime, like what MN120 says, you can continue to make sure you make that aspiration, have that strong base of dana, sila, chaga, panya, and whatever good deeds that you've done, make sure you make the aspiration, make sure you strengthen it, make sure you cultivate it, make sure you develop it, consistently, and it becomes strong such that, when the time comes, you have that requisite conditions to be reborn, in whatever specific realms of existence that you actually desire for.